Okay, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Thank you everybody for being patient and coming. And I just wanted to give a special shout out to some people who came a long distance today to be with us from San Diego, which is a 2.5-hour drive. And if anyone's driven obviously that way, it's not like a lot of fun. So lots of hasanat earned there. Then we have Kamran, who flew in from Sacramento, and also Muhammad, who flew in from the Bay Area as well. And there's people. And Bakersfield. Oh my gosh, so you drove a long way. Okay, God bless you. I'm sorry you had to do that. But happy that you're all here. Alhamdulillah. So I just wanted to do a couple of quick announcements. So I actually am really happy to announce we have another episode of Real Talk with Mito and Baba. If you haven't seen it, it's now up online, which if you don't know what that is, it's our 14-year-old son in conversation with his dad, the Sheikh. And we give him the opportunity to ask whatever question he has on his mind about anything. So it's actually, we were worried that he was not learning enough about Islam, and because he goes to a Catholic school too. So we were kind of concerned that, you're learning a lot about another religion. We want to make sure that you feel comfortable knowing about your own religion. But we want to really make it sort of more interesting for him and just let him ask, this was his time. But I think what has been really interesting for me is that it's just deep and interesting and very good for all ages. I've learned so much, and it's very real, which is something very beautiful. And I think that a lot of people who are still even trying to build their foundations of Islam will find a lot to benefit from this. It's stuff that I never hear anywhere else. So I'm actually very excited to share that. And we have some funny outtakes at the end too. So if you haven't had a chance to watch, I would definitely highly recommend. And it's our effort too to try and reach youth and have them be proud of this tradition and know that it's okay to ask any question you have on your mind, that there's no shame and nothing is off the table. So please do watch that. And for people who, I don't know if everyone has watched, what we do here. I usually start with an intro. I tell some stories and whatever, and I try to share some of my experiences as someone who has learned so much from my vantage point as, the partner, professional and personal to the professor. And hopefully, I always pray that please God help me say something that's either interesting, funny, or valuable to someone. And I'm grateful that I have this opportunity to speak as, convert, as a woman, as an Asian, and as someone who really cares deeply about this tradition. So last week, to start with my story, I actually celebrated my 53rd birthday. And thank you. And I say that because I'm thankful that I've never been one who's been very concerned about talking about age. So I think, maybe it has something to do with Asian genes, because Asians actually age well, and thankfully I can still get away with people thinking that I'm younger than I am. But I think, I bring up my birthday because, it's always a time to sort of reflect. Especially now as you get older, you realize, well, for me, it's like, okay, I don't think I'm going to live until I'm 106. At least I hope I don't. But maybe if I'm 105, I'll feel differently. But it's like when you realize that you're sort of more than halfway, through life, and you see how many people can pass at any time, I feel like birthdays are really important for sort of reflecting on life and reflecting on kind of your journey and, what you've been able to accomplish or not accomplish yet. And it's kind of a check-in, especially also with, where you are in terms of God and your faith. And so I remember, I always sort of tell people, at least I tell my son, everyone has sort of two ages. You have your physical age, which is your body, of course. And then you also have your age in your heart. And, I always feel like I'm barely out of my 20s. So, and, sometimes I'm even more immature. Like the joke at my house is that I get younger and more immature as I age, which I think is a good thing. But I also do have my 14-year-old son to remind me, Mom, you're so old. So keeps me in check. But, I think I always remember, my mother always telling me about my grandmother who would say, I really don't understand how quickly time passed. And I don't know why I'm in such an old body all of a sudden. And I feel so young inside. And I remember she told me that when I was in my 20s. And, at that age, you're kind of like, oh, yeah, whatever. You guys are old. Okay, whatever. But now that I'm actually, past, the 50-year mark, it is true. It's like time goes by. I think everyone knows how quickly time goes by. And I remember in college thinking every year going by faster and faster and thinking that, okay, at some point, things have to calm down. They have to slow down. You know, maybe it's just this phase that I'm going through. But now I still, every single year that I've been alive, I've noticed that time continues to ramp up faster and faster. So, you know, it's just a reminder. And you see people passing and you go, oh gosh, you know, anyone can go at any time. But, so, well, birthdays, okay, so just a little side note. So birthdays for me are sort of two things. One, I was saying to the two adult men in my family, it's an opportunity to participate in one activity guilt-free. And they had no idea what I was talking about. And so I was like, okay, for women who understand, like, life is very busy. And, you know, when you're juggling so many different things between family and job and kids and driving and blah, 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 you know, part of being like an older, you know, active person, woman, is you have a lot of guilt. Because it's kind of like, okay, I feel guilty that I'm not doing this, or I should be doing something else, or I'm not doing this fast enough, or that, you know, maybe somebody else does this better than me. And, you know, you juggle a lot. And you know, it's like I see like my women friends on Facebook writing about this dynamic, because I think women have not had to deal with certain things, like life as it is. Like, it's never been this way for women. It's like there's so much to accomplish. And with the advent of technology, everything speeds up. And so while you have the benefit of more productivity, you also have higher expectations and more things that you have to accomplish. And so, you know, it just feeds this sort of feeling like you can never really quite catch up, and you can never quite do all the things that you want to do. But at the same time, it's kind of a good thing, because I think women are very, you know, strong, and they're very resourceful. And I start believing that, you know, without women, this whole world would fall down, because we know we have to accomplish so many things and so wear so many different hats. And so I'm proud for that. And so I just wanted to give a shout out to all my fellow women who juggle a lot of different things. That, you know, that's really important. But as far as, you know, reflecting on, you know, the second thing, reflecting on mortality, and thinking about, you know, like, okay, how am I doing on my life purpose, and have I accomplished enough, and where am I with God, and where am I with my faith, and do I feel like, if God forbid I walk out tomorrow and I'm hit by a truck, am I going to be okay? You know, do I feel like I have achieved what I needed to achieve, and have I, you know, met the potential that God gave me? Because I really do believe that God gives every single person a gift and a purpose, and that part of the challenge is figuring out how to really live to your full divine potential using that specific gift that you were given before you leave this earth. And so, you know, oftentimes you know, I don't know if other people do this, but I go on Facebook and I spy on like my high school Facebook page, and I like look at other people and to see, you know, like how have people aged, what are they doing? And, you know, the truth of the matter is, it's like some people age really well, they look the same, and some people really did not age very well. And sadly, a lot of people in my high school class have also now passed away, which is a very sobering thing. And a lot of them died very young. And a lot of them died because they had cancer, or, you know, something cut their life short. And so that, again, is another, you know, one of those reminders that, you know, death is one of those things that no one really wants to think about, and no one really wants to talk about. But it's something that I think gives you immediate perspective. And especially as a Muslim, it's like one of these topics that, although it's uncomfortable, it's something that I think we really do need to engage and talk about and reflect about as a matter of living our lives, you know, to meet our purpose. I mean, of course, it'd be easier if you're a Christian and it's like, okay, whatever you do, no matter what, you go to heaven. You know, that was a concept that for me, when I was doing my faith search, when I was looking at what I really believed, I felt that that wasn't ultimately fair, it wasn't ultimately just. And it was one of the things that actually made me really attracted to Islam, is this idea of accountability, and that what you do in this life does matter, and that, you know, time matters, and that you do need to make choices wisely, because, you know, you will be held accountable. And, you know, but thinking, like, early on in my journey, of course, thinking about death and my accountability was a very uncomfortable topic. But I wanted to then take this opportunity to introduce you to a book that was very transformative for me. I don't know if anyone knows this. This is Al-Ghazali's book called On the Remembrance of Death and the Afterlife. And it's a fabulous book. I read it many years ago, but I kind of came across it again because, you know, it sort of like talks a lot about what our tradition has to say about death and dying and the afterlife, and kind of what happens even as you're approaching death. And, you know, the idea of, like, you're meeting with the angel of death, because it's like it could happen. The angel of death could come to collect your soul at any time, any place, wherever you are, in the middle of whatever you're doing. And it can be either a very good experience or it can be a very scary experience. And like I said, this book is kind of one of these books that's like, boom, okay, this is going to realign your priorities and the way you're thinking. And the book is, really tells you, it's important to remember, it's like, the only thing that's really constant in this life is like sort of death and taxes, right? And that there's this idea that everyone has this final exam that's coming. You don't know exactly when the final exam is coming, but you do know it's coming. And for a wise person, you will prepare for that exam. You don't want to be caught, not ready. And I wanted to share actually a funny, well, maybe it's dark humor, but it's really one of the things that was more memorable for me reading this book, is there's a story, a tradition that someone reports where, and this is about the angel of death. So Prophet Solomon is with one of his companions, and the angel of death is there. And so the companion to Prophet Solomon looks at the angel of death and sees him looking at him. And then the angel of death leaves. And so the companion goes to Prophet Solomon, "Who was that?" And Prophet Solomon says, "That was the angel of death." And so the companion says, "Well, I feel like he was looking at me, like he wanted to take me." And so Prophet Solomon said, "Well, okay, so what do you want me to do about it?" And he said, "Well, I want you to tell the wind to take me to the furthest part of India. I want to get away." So he did that. So Solomon, asked the wind to do that, and he went to the furthest part of India. So the angel of death comes back, and Solomon says to him, "So I understand, I see that you were looking at one of my companions." And he said, "Yes, indeed. I was sort of astonished because I have orders to collect his soul from the farthest part of India very soon, and I was astonished to see him standing here with you." So it was just, a funny story that it's like, it doesn't matter where you are, where you can't hide. When it's your time, it's your time. So, reflecting on these kinds of things, and on your life, you think back about sort of life lessons. So I thought I might share just a few life lessons that, maybe you could call it wisdom. Wisdom is one of those things that you sort of feel like you have to be old by definition to have wisdom. So, maybe I can just say they're life lessons and things to reflect on. But, it's not a bad thing, because I think that with the passage of time, you actually have enough experience where you can actually start seeing patterns, and you can start understanding how things connect. And I think that if you are paying attention and if you are a reflective person, that this is something that is actually quite, quite empowering and beautiful. So the first thing is, and maybe some of these are obvious to some people who are more wise than me, but, one is that everything changes in life. I mean, there's nothing that's really permanent. And the way that, part of me, there's sort of like a dreamy part of me that sort of thinks, oh, maybe somehow I could go back to, my childhood home and kind of re-step into that life, or maybe I could go back, high school exists somewhere, and, I could end up back there with my teenage friends and, feel that everything is the same. Or, maybe there are sentimental places that you've been, or restaurants that you like, or, places that that mean something to you in your heart, and you sort of naturally assume that they will always be there. Like you can always go back and find what was meaningful to you. But as you get older, you realize that a lot of these things that you really love are just not there anymore. They change, and it's sort of sad. And it's like, the professor and I used to joke that, oh, if there's anything that we like in particular, it'll not be there anymore. So we sort of started to think that if we liked something, it would be like the kiss of death. But with enough time passing, you realize that no, it's just everything. Everything changes, and even stores and people you worked with. I mean, it's just a matter of people changing, people not being there anymore. And so, the lesson though is that, you should be so grateful for anything that you love that exists at the moment, and be present in that moment and enjoy it, because it might not always be there. And even for things like, the Usuli Institute, I love coming here. I love these halaqas that we give, the weekly khutbahs and things like that. And, but I recognize that it's not always going to be this way. This gathering is one of my favorite times, but it may not, it will not be here forever. But so I'm grateful for every chance that we do have, an opportunity to gather. And But at the same time, so the only constant is change. But as Muslims, we know that the only constant is God, and that for everything that changes and everything that you lose and everything new that comes in, the only constant is God. And hopefully, as a Muslim, you will that like understanding is something that can give you a sense of security and peace. I mean, I guess if you know, like, okay, the only constant in life is God, does that bring you fear and apprehension and like insecurity? Or does that give you comfort and security and love? And I think that that's a really important thing to reflect on, because hopefully as a Muslim, with the things also that we talked about here, that building that relationship with God and understanding that God is your anchor and your constant should be a source of strength and source of love and source of inspiration. And I hope that, like for me, I hope everything that I do can help feed that conviction. Also, I guess sort of looking forward, this life here often leads to loneliness for many people. And we know that, I mean, especially here in America, people are talking about how loneliness is going to be sort of one of the biggest afflictions, I guess, especially as people get older. And that, there are a lot of studies that have shown that this is really devastating for people. And that many, like, people who are senior citizens oftentimes are alone, and they don't actually even interact with other people for long periods of time. And I believe that loneliness, is also connected to sort of this idea of the fear of death. Like, I think about my father, and my father, he's 80, and he just turned 80, and I remember once that he sort of confided in me that, he was scared of being lonely and scared of death. And he's not Muslim. And so it was really sort of sad for me to hear that, because I wanted to tell him like what I know as a Muslim and comfort him. But he's not very spiritually oriented. He's more of a scientific mind who is kind of like, well, you can't ever prove anything, so we never really know. But it's like I just felt like, this is where true faith really comes into play. And it's like one of those things that you can't necessarily prove to someone. They have to kind of arrive at it themselves. And that made me reflect on also, like, the idea of true faith. Like, when I think of my relationship, or, what a relationship with God would hopefully mean, it would be based on love and, security and peace and tranquility. I mean, something that is very fleeting for many people. And I know certainly before I became Muslim, I felt, I have talked about my experiences before I became Muslim, about how I sort of started this journey as very much a broken person, very anxious all the time, not ever really having experienced like an idea of true peace and true tranquility, and just being so engaged in my own sort of insecurities and fears and weaknesses that I didn't even, I was not even interested in thinking about death. I was just too, engulfed in kind of my own day-to-day anxieties. But, I felt that this journey, obviously is one that has allowed me to find experience what that feeling of peace and tranquility can be. And I wanted to point out, one of the things that the professor talked about yesterday in this khutbah, if you hadn't had a chance to listen to it. In the beginning of the khutbah yesterday, he talked about how to know God, you have to really love God. Not just obey God, but love God. And to love God, you have to first be an honest human being. And that was something that really resonated with me, because when I think back to the time that before I was Muslim, and even early as a Muslim, I felt that one of the biggest challenges was really being honest with myself. And, because if you're not honest with yourself, you are oftentimes burdened with fear. And for me, it's like fear of what's wrong with me, what I'm insecure about, sort of this fear of being found out, that I'm not as good as I appear to be, or I'm not as nice as I appear to be, or maybe, I was always putting on sort of an impression, and I wanted people to like me. But, interestingly, as a young person, I don't think very many people actually liked me, because I didn't really like myself. And I look at sort of like friendships that I had, I could easily say I didn't really have any people that I would count as really close friends. But, interestingly, it's sort of, I think when you're honest with yourself, you actually become empowered, because you face those fears and you start being able to be the first person, to say, no, this is what I need to work on. This is what is preventing me from, being like an open person, preventing me from being a loving person. And it's part of what I learned in my journey as a Muslim, is that part and parcel is the importance of that honesty. And once I started being more honest with myself, I wasn't afraid anymore, and I, could start being honest with God, and then I could start, like building a relationship with God. So it really resonated with me. I really encourage you to go back and listen to that khutbah from yesterday. So that was a really important life lesson. And, my attitude towards death today is very different than when I started this journey, where I used to not think about it or be afraid about it. Now I'm not afraid of death as much as I am afraid of not meeting sort of my God-given potential and like not being able to do the things that I think God intended for me to do. So coming back to this idea that everyone has a gift and everyone has a purpose, it's very important to determine what that is, and then to try and do everything you can to fulfill it. And so my worry is always like, oh my God, I'm going to run out of time before I am able to, do the things that I really want to do. But that's okay. We keep trying. But to come back, to my original point, I think that, your attitude about death is an indicator of the state of your relationship with with God and the state of your faith. And it's something that's really, important to reflect on. And, so now where and I think every Muslim needs to also ask themselves, what kind of a Muslim do I want to be? Do I, a lot of Muslims that we encounter who are searching, they would probably describe themselves as ethnic Muslims or passive Muslims or seeking Muslims or maybe guilt-oriented or ashamed Muslims, just Muslims by sort of a, distant association with their family. Or do you want to be a Muslim that's proud and justice-oriented and empowered and, able, like good with God and able to make a difference in the world? And, be the best person of yourself, best version of yourself, because that's what this faith calls for. And what, when I talk to people through the Usuli Institute and people are asking, a lot of different kinds of questions, I always come back to this. This is what we try to do, is we try to empower people, and we try to give them the tools to be the proud, strong, Muslims that can make a difference in the world. And that's what I really hope that moving forward for the rest of what's remaining of my life, that I can be that kind of Muslim, because I feel so grateful and so thankful that with everything that I've learned here, that, I feel like I have a right to my opinion. I feel like I have the ability to make a difference in the world, and that is actually what I really want to do. And, just to kind of emphasize the point, we focus a lot here on imparting knowledge and intellect, but I think that what really makes a difference is not necessarily your intellectual development, but falling in love with God. It's like, the intellectual knowledge will bring you to the front door, but your heart is what actually lets you in. And so, it's like really important, that feeling of love and the security and all of that comes with it. So, and especially with the state of the world the way that it is, it just gets harder and harder. And I feel that as Muslims, we really don't have a choice to sit things out, that we don't have the luxury of just saying it's someone else's business, it's someone else's responsibility. And, I wanted to call out also yesterday's khutbah, which was particularly powerful, is the professor talked about the verse in the Quran that dictators use to justify being in power and having people follow them, which is that, you have to obey God, the Prophet, and rulers. And he really deconstructed that and basically released every single Muslim from whatever connection or bondage or oppression they might feel from anyone who's telling them to take part in something that can lead to oppression or injustice. So please do watch that and pray for us that we don't get killed by a foreign government. That, it was a really powerful statement that basically pulled the rug out from every ruler that says you have to follow what I tell you and you can't question, you just have to shut up. So that was really important. And interestingly, I guess I'll close on this. Someone asked me yesterday, which was, I thought, very brave and interesting, said, okay, I know no one really likes to talk about death, but I really want to know, what do you and the professor want from us after you guys are dead? I love this question. And it's because it's honest, and it's really important, and it is like how you should be thinking about things. It's kind of like your time on this earth is limited, and you have to think about what is a legacy you want to leave behind, and what is it that you want to do. So I would say I'm going to answer it with two questions, and I'm going to kind of refer back to my earlier birthday thing. I have two birthday wishes. My first birthday wish is that, this is just a dream, it'll never happen, but I wanted to bring, I've met, since I became Muslim and since I started on this journey and, became someone who actually, the professor forced me, I should say this, forced me to be very honest with myself and develop myself. And I'm so grateful because, when you feel like your every day is very anxious, it's a hard way to live life. And, it's nice to see that as you get older that you can start making progress towards liking yourself as a person and believing that you have a reason for being here and that God loves you and that, that you actually have the ability to leave something behind. And when you start believing that about yourself, I think it shows, and you start attracting nice people. So I went from a place of not having really any friends that I really even liked or that liked me, to being able to have the blessing of meeting a lot of really beautiful people, beautiful women especially along the way. And so my dream is one day to sort of collect all of these beautiful women to come together where I can literally sit them down and just tell each and every one of them in front of each other why I love them and why I'm so grateful for their presence in this world and what they've done for me in this life. And it'll never happen because people are too busy, they live in too many parts of the country. So I have to figure out some other way to do it. But, just to say that, to go from a place of no friends to feeling like, oh my God, I have so many people, I don't even know if I would remember everyone that I love so much, is something beautiful that Islam gave me. And being Muslim by this approach gave me. So that's one wish. And then to answer the question about the second wish about, okay, so what should you guys all do when we're dead? I guess my hope and my wish through this work here at the Usuli Institute, because, we will not be here forever, but is that if people actually really love what they hear from us and our approach and just, how we try to be honest and real and loving and justice-oriented, is to really learn this school of thought. I personally believe this is its own school of thought. And there's so much content, reading the professor's books, listening to the lectures, reading the articles, listening to whatever, there's so much that can be studied over a lifetime. And, I think that I was saying to someone yesterday, who was interested in the Usuli approach, I feel like people need to ground themselves in something like a comprehensive view that has a strong foundation in love and justice and beauty. And if you really understand, if you master this thought or this approach from the reading, and I don't think it takes that much to really get a sense of what it is, that is such an empowering tool, and it gives you a lens with which to view other things and read other books and evaluate other things. Like when I was starting on this journey, I didn't know enough. As a convert, it's like, okay, if I could read one book and then read a second book and have my worldview completely turned around. And once I found the works of the professor, I felt like, okay, I trust this person. I believe, this approach resonates with my heart. I can love it. I can live this way. And that, I think, if you build that, it builds you as a person. It also gives you a way to interact with the world and make a difference in the world. So I would say, once we're gone, I hope people, if they love this as much as I do, I hope that they will become masters in this school of thought and then share it with people, because I feel that, for Muslims, it's like we have been traumatized by the whole Wahhabi conservative view for so long. I would love to see that replaced with, an approach based on love and based on beauty and all of that. So, so those are my two birthday wishes. So if you guys want to help me with either of those, I would be very happy. But thank you also. I'm grateful for this opportunity to speak to people and, and having people let me know that what I say, resonates with them. And that's a really it's a really beautiful thing that I'm grateful for that I never actually thought I would do. So that's it. So thank you very much.
inshallah, I hope that inshallah we'll be able to get through Surah Balad um, and finish it tonight, um, because there's so much else we need to cover. Um, how many of you were here in the last halaqa? Okay, because this today is a continuation of the past halaqa, and it is really. I'm not going to repeat what we talked about in the last halaqa, but it is really critical to listen to the introduction of that situates and speaks about um, the thrust and the normative message of Surah Al-Balad, this surah, um, and also some of the critical introductory material that acts as a prelude to the surah. I just a quick comment before we about what Grace talked about. Of course, I always say that I never know what Grace is going to talk about because we never coordinate. So, but I'm struck by a couple of things she said. Um, you know, if you've ever seen the light leave someone's eyes as they pass away, when someone dies, you can literally see the light depart in the eyes, especially if they pass away with their eyes open. Um, you know that at that moment you really know that this is not all there is, and that um, the nature of the ruh, the nature of the soul is something that is incredible and elusive and truly a mystery. Um, that the entire physical embodiment that we live in, which constitutes 5% of what exists in the world that we dwell in, we only see 5%. We only experience the entire material world as 5% of what space is. Um, and if you think of anyone that you know that was alive and died, you can really, everyone that you know that is dead confronts what ultimately all of us are going to confront, because all of us will confront the moment of death, which is one of which is a very difficult moment. I mean, there is no way to get around it. One of my constant dua, and it's a dua I repeat after every prayer, Allahumma ahsin khatimati wa arihni fi mawti. Um, Allah make my end good and make my passing away peaceful and comfortable. Because everyone that you know that has died is either in a state of grace or a state of anxiety and fear, if not worse. At a minimum, you're either in a state of grace, a tranquility, peace, or anxiety and fear, or worse. Or worse. Now, it's a smart human being, and many of us are not smart, as the Quran says, that even if you wanted, even whatever you do, most people will not believe. ولو حرصت, that even if you are keen on it, the fact is that most people just are oblivious. But if you're smart, you think of that moment and you say, I will do whatever is necessary so when that moment comes, it doesn't become a terrifying moment for me. That when that moment comes, I am I am among those that pass away confronting peace and tranquility rather than the fear, the anxiety, the terror. If you ever seen, there are a lot of people who have not led good lives, and when you observe their process of death, it's actually traumatic. Um, the fear in their eyes as they're passing away, the terror. Um, so one thing is that the what it seems like a commonsensical point is that you just say the moment will come, regardless of what you do, the moment is going to come, and I want that moment to pass with as much repose as possible. But second, remember that the counter of accountability continues long after your death. In other words, your status changes after you pass according to what you've left behind. If you've left behind a lot of goods, a lot of things that allow that counter of goodness to keep counting, your status can change from anxiety and fear to an improved status. So a smart person, and the opposite is also true. If you've left a lot of pain and hurt, so let's say you've killed people and you've left orphans. Every time these orphans suffer the consequences of your actions, your negative counter increases and your state worsens. So a smart human being would say, I want the legacy that I leave behind, whether children, pious children that continue doing dua for you, that improves your status. Whether neighbors that you've done many acts of kindness that continue to enjoy the blessings of that kindness. Whether orphans you've taken care of, or schools you've built, or hospitals you've built, whatever good you were able to do, so that after you're gone and you are no longer in control of your own will and autonomy, the will and autonomy of others can accrue to your benefit because you've enabled that will and autonomy to do good. These elementary points, it's amazing how much of our life a lot of Muslims, especially the young Muslims, and younger they are, they ask a lot of questions about intellectual issues that often act as a form of dissimulation and often intellectual maneuverings that obfuscate the ultimate truth that we all escape. A lot of people don't realize that, and I mean, listen, I'm someone who lived his entire life studying philosophy, so it's not, you can't call me anti-philosophical by any stretch of the imagination. But what I can tell you is, as a teacher, a lot of the questions I confront from would-be students, or even just curious people or interest people, immediately betray their sense of elusiveness about confronting their own truth that Grace was talking about, that sense of honesty. So, to give you a very concrete example, instead of thinking about what if I die tomorrow, am I in a state of grace or a state of damnation, I can spend a lot of time thinking about a complicated historical question like slavery, and say, I'm going to spend my time thinking about whether the Prophet had slaves or didn't have slaves, or who of the companions had slaves, whether they freed them, didn't free them, whether the rules of modesty and the rules of hijab, or whatever issue. And my frame of mind moved from focusing on the ultimate question of grace and damnation and good deeds and lack of good deeds to an intellectualized issue that acts as a distraction. And I often, when students ask me questions, I often do not answer. And the reason I do not answer, and I know that it gets very frustrating for students, because they feel like they have to chase after me to actually give them anything resembling a response to a historical or a philosophical question. But often I don't answer because I know that the question is a form of distraction. They are distracting themselves because they are not honest with themselves. And that, in fact, the intellectual issue is a red herring. It is not a serious intellectual issue that actually they are engaged in to contribute something good or beneficial or original, but rather it's something that they are distracting themselves with. Honesty with the self is if you want the essence of what the Quran, the entire revelation, came to do, is confronting you with some ultimate basic questions about the legacy you leave behind. The other point, quickly, I'm so amused that you talk about when we're both gone. That's assuming we're both gone at the same time. So I mean, that's all in Allah's hand, of course. But
Well, we will if you wait long enough.
yeah, I mean, inshallah. I mean,
We may God before you.
yeah, I mean, it's in Allah's hands. But I like the point that you cherish the moment, because I think of a lot of my teachers, and who have all passed away, subhanAllah. I mean, and I think of the moments that I spent in my life in a blessed presence. Remember that any human beings that get together to study in Allah's sake, they are in this blessed state. I mean, the hadith says that the angels come, and whether you take the hadith literally or metaphorically, the point is it's a blessed state, and these moments do pass. And one of the things that is very remarkable and frustrating about modern life is that we don't cherish the moment that yields the word, the moment in which the word is the focus of our attention and the anchoring point for our souls. When it's lost, and it becomes elusive, and you will miss it, and you spend a lifetime agonizing for it. Thinking about what after, if it translates to commitment, because I'm often, for instance, I mean, through these halaqas, I've often been intrigued by the people that come in and the people that leave, and the people who appear in the halaqas and float out and so on. You know, each person determines their own fate, but I've often think, subhanallah, every opportunity to learn is a true gift from Allah. And what you do with this gift, whether you take it lightly or take it seriously, whether it becomes an anchoring point in life or simply a form of entertainment and distraction, or a form of feel good. Well, you know, I attend the halaqah, so I must be pious and Allah must be. Um, these are all things that I think deserve serious reflection and serious thought. I, I mean, we're taught to be very hesitant about saying this, but I don't feel, well, no, no. In my ibadah, I often told that the message I get is that my life is not going to be long, and I have a specific time on this earth, and that when it's, and alhamdulillah, that it's not going to be a very long time. Um, I pray to God that what I leave behind is not entertainment, but is something that continues to yield hasanat. And the only way to do that is through people who carry your words into action and carry your words to other students and other people. And I'm always looking for true mentorship relations rather than the way that we deal with religion in our very material and very capitalistic and very superficial society. Um, but that's in Allah's hand. I send out this message for people who ask, well, we want to study and so on. Studying in a true mentorship relationship is life transformative. And I'm not talking to all of you professionals or old people, forgive me. Uh, you know, I'm talking to the young generations who, if you true mentorship is you change your entire existence um, to commit to learning the word. It's very hard. It's a true jihad. It's a jihad that is often traumatizing, but its yield, what comes out of the commitment, is life transformative, and hopefully it elevates your state of grace after you pass away.